study was conducted by Swedish researchers on conscripts in the 1980s on the side effects of marijuana on mental health. The study showed that marijuana users had an increased risk of developing schizophrenia by 2.5 to 6-fold. They displayed positive symptoms such as hallucinations and paranoia. Now you might be thinking, what is all this? What is schizophrenia? What makes it so bad? How does marijuana tie into all of this? I thought marijuana was legal, so it must be okay.
So despite the criminal laws in Canada surrounding marijuana, about 50% of Canadians have actually admitted to using it at one point in their life, and about 14% of Canadians are current users. So why do they do it? Some people say it's addiction. However, this is a very hot topic. According to the book Science of Marijuana, about 10 to 30% of people actually develop a dependency upon the drug, and statistics show about 9% of users actually form a serious addiction. If you don't do it, or if you have tried it without seeing the benefits, you may not understand why other people do it. Let's take a look at reasons why people do it, including social, medical, and spiritual reasons. Firstly, people may not even know about these negative consequences. It is in popular opinion today that marijuana is a soft drug. It mellows people out, does no harm. It is a natural plant after all, right? The media also glamorizes the use of marijuana without considering the legal issues or the health consequences. So let's take a look first at the social use of why people use it. So research has shown that people use it to enhance the quality of their life. They use it for recreational purposes, socializing, and making everyday activities more enjoyable because of the enhancing effect of marijuana. One marijuana user actually was quoted to say, "In my humble opinion, marijuana is not a drug. It's a seasoning, like salt for your life. Just the same as a person uses salt to enhance a bland soup or what have you, smoking weed can make things more intense and enjoyable." People also use it for medical reasons, as it helps to reduce physical and emotional pain. People use it to self-medicate when they have anxiety problems, stress, or suffer from insomnia. They also use it to treat physical pain as well. It often helps people relax, or it has helped to concentrate some people. A study actually shows that it helps in blurring the lines of reality. Therefore, it may actually take away some of the discomfort of social exclusion, which is maybe why some of the more troubled teens stick to marijuana use as a way of self-medicating their problems with reality.
Marijuana. How can we conceptualize something that is so abstract and make it more personal? Well, we can personify it. Let's call him Juan. Juan is a very intense person. He intensifies conversation and adds clarity to your life. But the problem is that this clarity is very negative. Like the negative impacts of marijuana on the brain, this Juan character also comes with his drawbacks. First up, curiosity. Curiosity is what defines us as humans. It's what got us to where we are today, but it can also be a problem, especially for the youth experimenting with drugs. Since marijuana is seen as harmless and easy, it is also seen as the go-to drug. But it's also a problem because it makes it a gateway drug. So if it's easy, if it's accessible, if it's not as addictive as people might think it is, it might lead you to something more dangerous, and that's where it becomes a problem. This leads us to peer pressure. Similar to the curiosity drive, the need to fit in is just as strong. Teenager is almost synonymous with the word peer pressure. At this point in life, it's more of a popularity contest, and anything that you can or cannot do, you will try just to fit in. Marijuana is one of these things, because that stuff is dope, yo. It is also MJ, Mary Jane, pot, weed, herb, and a bunch of other words too cool for me to handle. So, it's cool. Says who? The media. The media is one of the most influential sources for all age groups, essentially. But if I were a teenager, what would I see in the media that would persuade me to smoke a joint? Well, as a Canadian, I would see Justin Trudeau, the Liberal leader who supports legalizing weed. As a football fan, I would have seen the Super Bowl between two states that had recently legalized weed. As a Miley Cyrus fan, I would have seen her obnoxious outfit in her recent tour this year. And also as a person who just enjoys a good movie. I mean, there's so many out there that I can just pick out at random, like 50-50, There's Pineapple Express, and of course, Harold and Kumar. Essentially, it's everywhere. It's in all aspects of life. It's in music, it's in politics, it's everywhere. You're gonna see it, you can't help it, but you can make an informed decision. It might be cool, it might be easy, but that's for you to decide. So then the question becomes, how high are adolescents willing to reach just to fit in?
The neuropsychological effects of marijuana. Marijuana has a compound called THC, which is an endocannabinoid. Cannabinoids are psychoactive drugs, meaning that they bind to your brain and create reactions, psychological reactions. Now, the kind of receptors that they bind to are called cannabinoid receptors, hence the endocannabinoid. And these receptors are located in the prefrontal cortex in the brain. They're located in the occipital-parietal cortex in the brain, and they're located in limbic system structures such as the amygdala and the hippocampus. What does the prefrontal cortex do, and what does the occipital-parietal cortex do? The prefrontal cortex mediates executive function, things like planning, organizing, and inhibiting automatic behaviors. The occipital-parietal cortex mediates visual processing, specifically visual processing that has to do with motion, things like people walking, a ball being thrown, the motion related to that, etc. Now, what marijuana does when it binds to these areas is it slows down the synaptic firing in these areas, meaning that it slows down the ability for these areas to help us behave the way we should be behaving. Meaning that if marijuana was to bind to my prefrontal cortex, I'd have a hard time planning my behavior, organizing my behavior. I'd also have a hard time inhibiting my automatic reflexes. When marijuana binds to the prefrontal cortex and the occipital-parietal cortex, it impairs our cognitive processing. It impairs us to accurately know what's going on in our environment visually, or to be able to plan and organize our behaviors. When it binds to places in the limbic system, such as the amygdala and the hippocampus, well, we know that the amygdala regulates emotional processing, and we know that the hippocampus regulates memory. So, we know that, and when THC binds to these areas, it decreases their size. It acts as a neurotoxin when it binds to them. So what happens when they decrease in size? Well, we have really bad emotional processing after that, and we get impairment in our memory. Now, you know that marijuana makes you feel happy and it makes you feel euphoric. Well, what does this? It's because it binds to the amygdala, and because the amygdala regulates emotional processing, well, you start to feel happy. You start to have an increased secretion of happy hormones. And we also know that marijuana increases dopamine. Now, what does dopamine do in the brain? That makes us feel happy because it's associated with reward, right? And dopamine runs in the mesolimbic pathway in the brain. This mesolimbic pathway is what regulates reward and stimuli. Now, the stimuli in this case would be marijuana. Reward, well, the euphoric feelings that we're starting to feel because of the surge of dopamine that's happening and the binding to the amygdala. What happens is dopamine increases when marijuana binds, and then the brain starts to associate marijuana with happy feelings. This makes us dependent on marijuana after that, because we start to associate it with happiness. Also, another problem is that because of reduced executive function, the second you see marijuana, you've already automatically associated it with happy feelings in the brain. And we know that executive function inhibits automatic processing. Now, if I have impaired executive function, that means I'm impaired to inhibit my behaviors. And if I know something's going to make me happy, well, then how am I going to inhibit myself from doing it, even though I know it's wrong when I have impaired executive function? This is what increases the relapse rate for marijuana users. And this is also why they are dependent, even though they think that they're not dependent on marijuana. This is where the social dogma of marijuana is not addictive is incorrect. Now consider all these factors. Consider that your brain structures are decreasing, right? The function of them is being impaired, right? So why would you do this to your brain? People with decreased amygdala sizes are associated with antisocial behaviors. They also have a higher risk of getting schizophrenia because of hallucinations and psychotic symptoms. Is it really worth it?
Well, schizophrenia is classified as a psychotic disorder according to the DSM 5. Schizophrenia affects the way a person acts, thinks, and really views the world around them. Individuals with schizophrenia have an alternate perception of reality. There are many different types of schizophrenia, such as paranoid, disorganized, catatonic, undifferentiated, and residual. So, how is this drug induced schizophrenia caused, as you might all be wondering? Well, this is where the dopamine theory comes into play. Dopamine is basically a transmitter in your brain, and it is responsible for transmitting signals in between the neurons of the brain. So, the dopamine hypothesis of schizophrenia basically states that symptoms of schizophrenia, specifically the hallucinations, the delusions, and the psychosis, is really a result of too much dopamine being active within the brain or being secreted into the synapses of the neural circuit. And as a result of this, it produces this overstimulation of the cells and these symptoms. With the experimenting of marijuana, which is known to really release an excessive amount of dopamine within the brain, will often precipitate the onset of this illness and really trigger the symptoms of this illness. Now, what are the effects of schizophrenia? Schizophrenia really affects the person in everyday life because of the delusions and the hallucinations that really prevent them from living a daily normal life that really you need to plan out and do daily routines and things. Relationship problems often occur because they usually isolate themselves or they really withdraw themselves from reality, or the individual might just be extremely paranoid, which really affects their daily routines and their relationships with others, with family members, as well as other individuals in society. Dopamine also increases the drug intake, so more intake of this marijuana, which then increases the dopamine even more, which contributes back to an excessive amount or an increased amount of hallucinations and delusions that the person experiences. It's really just a big circle that connects to one another, and the cycle just keeps going. And finally, there's also an increased risk of suicide, more during a psychotic phase as opposed to a depressive phase, because during the psychotic phase, the individual usually has more energy to go through with the attempts of suicide.
Marijuana use permanently impairs the brain, especially a developing brain. The number of teens using cannabis is largely increasing due to the positive view of marijuana in today's culture. Using cannabis during a developmental age produces lifelong changes in the circuitry of the brain, impairing perception and behavior. Impairment in the minds of our populations is concerning, since our minds are the product of our society. If our brains cannot function optimally, how can we produce a thriving society? We need to critically consider what society deems as harmless and beneficial. The high produced by marijuana is a small price to pay for the health of our minds.
Starting.
What is the video?
Yep.
What do you want me to talk about?
So do you want to tell us about your experience with marijuana?
Okay, well, it all started with a family trip to my homeland. So what happened was, we got my whole family, put them in a bus, and we took a little trip. Little did I know that trip was going to have a little enhancement to catch my breath.
Question, where is your homeland?
It's Cuba.
Cuba, okay.
Okay, so what happened was, we were seeing the site, and after we were done, we came out and we saw these hippies, per se. I'm not sure what they were actually, I couldn't tell you. But they had something to sell, and my uncles were buying. So all I saw were some sort of like cheesecloth, and then pouring out this green juice, which I wasn't having none of. That was nasty. And then they also had these types of herb patties. So all my uncle told me was, if you eat this, you laugh, you're gonna keep on laughing. If you cry, you're gonna keep on crying. So I was 12 at the time. I didn't really know much about drugs, but I had a good idea. So I took half of the patty, made a mistake, didn't feel anything in 10 minutes, went to sleep. And that's when it kicked in. I was sitting on the bus, and as the bus was just going, I could hear every single sound that it made, every single bump that we made. I could visualize it. I could smell it in a sense. It's just like everything was enhanced. I remember I kept repeating the same phrases over and over again, and then I'd forget. Like I literally felt like a goldfish. I had the hunger of like 1,000 bulls. I wanted to just eat everything. Like I remember there was this bowl of peanuts that I ate, the entire bowl. It was huge too. And then I forgot I ate them. So just pandemonium. And then the best part was we had this bag of white shirts. I don't know what it was, but that bag of white shirts was the funniest thing of my life at that time. I just looked at them and I just lost it. So that just goes to show how much fun and havoc it can wreak on you.
How about after?
Afterwards, I felt sick. I felt a little foggy. I don't really remember much of the night before. I just remember that I did a lot of laughing and possibly some crying. I was just lost my control. That's it.
All right, thank you.